Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Now for lately, I know the videos have been kind of sparse, and the reason is again I'm very busy with moving. I've just finally finished moving last Sunday, so videos should resume to a weekly schedule, and also video formatting with my face and everything is going to return starting next week as well, so that's awesome. Now for this week, what I want to do is do a very quick video and looking at an NDP candidate David Eby's housing platform. I don't know, is it Eby's or Eby? Sorry if I butcher your name, but basically I do want to take a look at his housing platform that he proposed should he win the premier for BC. Now this is not a political video, I'm not endorsing him or anything. I just think that he has a lot of points here that are very interesting and are actually actionable. I want to talk about them. I want to raise awareness, and I also want to have some discussion with my viewers on if you think these are good points or not. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video and look at his points. Alright, so let's go over his platform one by one and make some comment as we go. So starting off, the first point is really focus on actions for those without homes. And here he has 3 points to double the BC grant for nonprofit to allow more projects to be, start immediately to address the homelessness. He also wants to work with First Nation or Indigenous, increase their funding, and also work with local groups to really start different projects. And lastly, to increase staffing support for services and people living in supportive housing. Now, all in all, there's not a lot of super actionable or concrete ideas. This is more vague. And I also is not very knowledgeable in the First Nation situation, so I'm not going to comment too much here, but just know that part of his platform does tackle this. Moving on, next, however, he wants to talk more about securing housing for everyone. So here, his starting paragraph is to acknowledge the issue of rising rent and also big corporates that are buying all the properties, and he's ready to tackle the following. The first one is Rental Housing Acquisition Fund. So in here, he's going to provide $500 million in capital funding to jumpstart a rental housing acquisition strategy to quickly and efficiently provide one-time capital grants so that nonprofit can purchase affordable rental buildings listed for sale to protect the current renters living there without displacement. Next, participating nonprofits will be supported in obtaining private financing so that an income generated by current rent will sustain the financing and operating costs of the property, minimizing the financial involvement of the province on an ongoing basis. Tenants who need help will be supported by rent supplement to ensure building sustainability. Lastly, increasingly, in BC and across Canada, rental housing is being bought up by huge international corporations driving up rents for regular British Columbians. Will establish by law a first right refusal for acquiring these at-risk homes and secure renters housing. So here, this is exactly the thing that I spoke about last time. I made a video on a company wanted to come in and buy a lot of detached home and kind of turn them into rental full-time. I made this video a couple of months ago, and in there I really disagree with this move. I think it's really going to be harmful for the housing market, and I suggested if there's any way, either ban them outright from doing so, or just make sure your nonprofit or the people that are really, trying to serve the BC people get first opportunity to buy them before the big corpo gets to. These kind of recommendations are very good. The $500 million is good to kind of help out with the bidding, but first right of refusal and access to easy and better private financing is excellent, and this is exactly what we need to help on the supply issue side, because it's not just about building more buildings. We also want to make sure that existing supply don't get all bought out by big corpo. So I'm very happy about these initiatives. They look very actionable. Now, next, he also want to tackle something called BC Builds. So in here, his comment is that across the world and in BC, governments have intervened to build attainable middle-class housing to ensure people can afford to live in communities where they work. For example, including the entire country of Singapore, the city of Vienna, closer to home, the city of Whistler. A David Eby government will immediately launch BC Builds, a housing development initiative representing a substantial expansion of government's role in facilitating the delivery of middle-class home that people can actually afford. And in there, his points are the following. Work with First Nation and city governments and private and non-profit partners in both urban and rural areas to offer rapid approval, increase density, land, and construction financing to deliver multi-family housing development that can offer attainable middle-class housing for a range of incomes, both rental and purchases. Also, using tools like upzoning select parcels in participating partners' municipality, in combination with government's favorable lending rates and matched with expedited approvals, and for some projects public land, will result in significant saving directed towards further reducing the cost of housing for people to live in those units. Moving on, these units will be accessible to BC residents only with eligibility determined by working with partnering municipalities to determine local priorities. Affordability must be built in long term for all projects, including when homes are sold. Options include co-op structures, community land trust, and share equity partner models. So this is actually really cool to see that they pay attention to places like Singapore, which we have done a video on long ago looking at their system. I think Singapore has one of the best housing policy in the world. And basically how they did it is by government intervention. They carved out a huge part of the city to have kind of rent control and also price control housing for very young or low middle class family to have a chance to buy something at a much lower price, live in there, and then when they sell it, they also can't make too much money off of it, but they will make some. So then the next family can also be very affordable and can kind of buy over. And I also really agree that the trade-off for this should be looking at places further away from the city. Now, I would have suggested having a special unit only focusing on approving these kind of projects. So maybe you don't even want to go through the regular approval channel. You want to have a separate special unit just looking at these kind of permits, and just make sure they get approved at lightning speed so we can start building as soon as possible. Now, I also agree with one of the things is they mentioned is working with private builders. You have to realize that private builders have the best efficiency out there and also the most resource. So if you are to make this work, you do need them to participate. Now, in here, they did mention finding a special model that could work, money-wise. It does sound good with them. I would also suggest they can offer outside incentive. So maybe they can look at how, kind of the US government does it with the vaccine companies. So they say that, hey, if you're able to develop a vaccine with us, if you focus all your effort and energy and make sure we have a vaccine as soon as possible for COVID, we will grant you kind of like a pass on the next drug that you develop that need a FDA approval. So you will have the first spot. So this is kind of like the reward for focusing so much effort in the vaccine that we need right now. They can actually take this idea. So maybe if private companies are willing to step up and help with these kind of government-led projects, maybe the trade-off would be the next one or two private projects they're looking to build, they have a kind of, they can skip the line and get it approved much quicker. So I think that's also a win-win, offer them what they want, but in exchange, get their support, get their resources. Now, one last caveat here is what makes Singapore very workable is their infrastructure is also very, very good. So that even if people were to live further away, they're not going to be as impacted for the travel time for work. While work from home is a lot more common now, if traffic takes way too long, it's still going to make it impossible for a lot of people to go into these projects because they just can't get to work. Now, David's next initiative is to level the playing field, and his comment here is that big and small investors alike are using housing shortage to make excessive profits through short-term flipping. So we will use data collected on real estate sales and return to construct a flipping tax to discourage these activities. And here he's gonna apply a BC flipping tax, basically putting onto the first 2 years of properties. But he also understands that, things happen. Like, for example, one of my clients got a new job, they have to move, 60 km away. They can't live in this home anymore. So there will be exceptions. Builders will also be exempt to encourage housing constructions. Really, they're just targeting on those, very, very quick flippers. They don't really have an issue with people buying investment property and renting them. It is an essential part of the system. I think it's not going to be very useful in today's environment. I don't think anybody is flipping anymore, especially in BC. But even if we're back to a low interest environment, I don't think this is going to be too powerful. I doubt many people are looking to sell within 2 years. So I don't think it's going to help with too big portion of a demand. It could be more useful if this is applied to pre-sale assignment as well. There is still quite a bit of people doing it because it can still be very lucrative if you hit the right timing and if the interest rate is low enough, because you don't have to buy the whole house. You just need to pay the down payment, which is 20 to 25% of the house, to hold this assignment. So if this rule includes the pre-sale flipping as well, the assignment flipping, then I see this to be a lot more powerful. Now, lastly, he's talked a little bit about dealing with frauds, cheats, and criminals. So British Columbians are tired of being told that gang members are known police while no apparent actions are taken to seize the proceeds of the crimes. So some points here, for example, are going to take the Cullen Commission recommendation to create a new task force or tool to allow investigation into suspicious transaction in the real estate. Also, purchasers suspected of organized crime will be forced to explain how they got the money to buy properties, etc. They also have new rules to target things like using a bare trust to buy real estate. So for those that don't know what bare trust is, it's basically called a naked trust, where you can assign a trustee to buy the house. So it's technically not their house, but you assign the house to them. So in their trust, they're basically managing it for you, but you are actually the beneficial owner. So if you use a bare trust to buy the property, the trustee's information is going to be the homeowner's info. So you can actually hide your own identity. And this is how a lot of the wealthy people or the organized crime do things to hide their assets. So targeting bare trust is definitely a good thing. But again, I'm not going to comment too much on this because I'm not an expert on fighting money laundering. I don't know how these things work in detail. I do think a separate unit to focus on discrepancy in income versus property value is good. Very similar to what CRA does this already. They do audit by postal codes. So maybe do an automatic, audit or notice of auditing. If someone's income reported does not match the house value they have, or maybe even the mortgages that they hold. I don't know if they can get these kind of information. If they can just say, hey, you have to explain to us how are you funding the mortgage, where are you getting money, etc. If you don't explain in time or don't have a good explanation, you will be taxed heavily, like 5% of the house value, 10% of the house value as a penalty. So finally, the platform also talks about reducing barriers of entry and delivery of attainable housing. And here he listed a lot of things that he wants to reform. Some of the things that are more interesting are allowing a single family home, the land, to be able to divide up into 3 units of the same footprint, as long as they're consistent with existing setback and height requirements. Also, secondary suites will be made legal in every region of the province. This is huge. And then the rest are just making sure there's reforms going on to make sure the municipal approval process is a lot simpler and straightforward. Also, removing some strata restrictions. For example, there's no tenants allowed, or 19 plus, where if you have a baby, you technically have to move out because it's 19 plus only in the building. They want to remove all of that. And lastly, just to make it a little bit more difficult to do Airbnb within BC. Now here is super huge on the rule on splitting your single family home into 3, and also the secondary suite being made legal. Now I expect that naturally, if you do this, you're going to bump up the land price because now it has a way higher resale value. So a 1.5 million home can now be made into 3 different properties, each worth maybe 700k. So together, they're actually the same land actually now costs 2.1 mil. But the point is that now you potentially have 3x the supply with a much lower entry point. Yes, your home will be a lot smaller, that's for sure, but at least your entry point is lower, because right now your entry point into a single family home is at least 1.5 mil, if not 2 mil, for most of the areas, which makes it impossible for 90% of the Canadians. And indirectly, this also can make land assembly a lot easier to do. There's a lot more options for developer instead of having to buy the whole block and then redevelop them into different zoning and build townhomes. Maybe this allowed them to have much smaller projects on a smaller scale and can do things a lot faster, which can speed up the process of construction as well. But this also is going to worsen traffic in those areas. So, if you're gonna implement these kind of things, you also should make sure your traffic can handle them, or else you're gonna create a nightmare scenario in Vancouver. Second, legal suite, like I said, great incentive. This should add to rental supply. Approval process, yes. This is probably one of the biggest issue in the supply shortage right now. Approval process is abysmal. There's way too slow and too many red tapes. It's really time for a complete overhaul and match the modern problem with a modern solution instead of sticking to the old style that doesn't work anymore. All right, so this is the platform and these are the points. And all in all, I just gonna say I really like what David Eby is bringing up. Some of these are downright actionable and I think can really help with the supply problem. And also, let's remove the myth right now. There's no way you can remove demand on houses. Like, just look at how many people are coming into BC every year, plus how aggressive the federal government is with new immigrants. If people immigrate here, pretty much 80% of them is going to look Ontario or BC, and then it's maybe Montreal or Calgary. So there's no way you can help the demand. You cannot lower it. You can only tackle the supply. Now, people are saying that interest rate will massively increase supply because it's going to push the price down. House is going to crash, and also mortgage is unaffordable. So a lot of people are forced to sell, and there's pent-up supply or whatever. Now, while this might be true for a short period of time, like what we're going through right now, there's no way this is going to create enough supply to meet the ever-increasing demand. And also, this is not a long-term solution. We're in a massive housing shortage. As you can see on the screen right now, a healthy vacancy in the city is 3%. In Vancouver, we're probably less than 0.5% right now if you look. Maybe close to 0%. Like, every house you see being rented are rented out at the end of the day at an extremely high price. So no amount of interest rate is going to deter people from entering popular cities like Vancouver or Toronto. If you want to fix housing, you need to start tackling policies and real issues like approval process. So I really agree with this platform. I think everybody should pay attention to this. Also, opposite parties. It doesn't matter who wins at the end. Like I said, that's not the point of this video. I just think whoever wins, you should pay attention to this platform right now, and you should probably copy most of these things and make sure you act on them. Because this is not an issue where you can just keep throwing extra money at it and say, oh, we're going to allocate 500 million, 600 million, we're going to build all these. When you have such an abysmal approval process, and also, your land is so restricted on what you can do and what you can't do. You need a fundamental change. You need a complete overhaul in the governing body and establish relationships with private builders. You need their help as well. So I really like these points. I think it's very rare to see a politician to come up with a solution that is a lot more modern to match the current day's problems. This is the whole point of me making this video. Now, what I want to hear from you guys is, what do you think about his points? Do you agree with them? Do you see problem, or you just see them to not work and not help with this shortage we're seeing right now? Let me know in the comment down below. If you like these kind of videos, I will return to a regular schedule. I do upload them 8:30 EST every Tuesday. So if you want more of them, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell button so you get all the notifications in the future. Alright, this is Jacky. I hope you found this interesting. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!